Hello everyone, Bashrob here. In this video, we'll talk about the perfect start to a misery run. Early and mid-game misery are mostly about preparing for the post-broken body life after day 46 and learning how to live with the limitations from the new afflictions as you get them. If you're starting a misery run, you probably already have experience with Interloper. A misery start will feel somewhat similar, but way more unforgiving. Now, just like on Interloper, the main priorities when spawning should be matches, hexo and hammer, then bow, and eventually fur clothing to counter the low temperatures. The main difference from Interloper is that the cold hits you pretty much right at the start of the game, and no matter what you do, you will not have clothing good enough to deal with these temperatures properly anytime soon. The extreme cold is the true first affliction of misery. This makes finding a flask much more important. And since you get a 5 kilo carry capacity penalty after just one day, the technical backpack is also high on the priority list, and so is keeping well fed from day 3 on. This will put you to 35 kilos of carry capacity, and more importantly, you'll be able to carry twice as much when exhausted, since the carry weight bonus doesn't decrease with fatigue. While on Interloper, flask and backpack were merely nice to have, on misery they should be among your top priorities early on. Your options for matches are limited. There are only 2 guaranteed packs of matches anywhere near the starting area: Rural Store and Mountaineer's Hut. So unless you want to rely on luck, one of these 2 places should be your first destination. Both are viable, but since both flask and backpack are a high priority, I recommend going for the 3 mountain start, which means focusing on Timberwolf Mountain, Ash Canyon and Blackrock early on, though Blackrock is usually optional. There's definitely other early game strategies that are viable, but I believe this one is the most resistant to bad RNG, and you should be able to get a very solid start each run. The general idea for this start is to loot the lower area of Timberwolf Mountain, move to Ash Canyon, grab the guaranteed combat pants, backpack and crampons, stock up on coal and birch bark, and hit the summit on your way back from Ash Canyon. Note that with crampons, it is possible to climb up to the summit even if you're exhausted, so you don't have to worry about a bedroll at this point yet. This is a very powerful start even on Interloper, but on Misery it shines even more, as everything you need in the early game can be found here. You get guaranteed matches, hexo, hammer, flask and the backpack early on, in addition to many other nice to have items. You should be able to run straight to Mountaineers after spawning and make it to the hut before frostbite or hypothermia gets you, as long as you don't stop anywhere. Tool spawns on Misery work the same way they do on Interloper. They are tied to loot tables. You're assigned one of 4 loot tables when you start the game, and this loot table never changes. It's a mechanic that lets the game randomize item spawns between regions. If you know some item spawn belongs to a specific loot table, you can figure out which of the 4 loot tables you're on, and then can predict where the other tools spawn. Fortunately, the 3 mountain start is pretty much the same, regardless of your loot table, so you don't have to worry about loot tables too much. You will find a hexo in Timberwolf Mountain, either in Mountaineer's Hut or above the Crystal Lake, and if it's not there, it will be waiting for you on the summit. And once you're done with 3 mountains and ready to forge, you can pick up the hammer in Pleasant Valley on your way back. Only loot table 3 makes things a little bit more difficult, as there is no hexo in Timberwolf Mountain and no hammer in Pleasant Valley. Instead, you have to look for the hammer in Timberwolf Mountain, and you'll have to go to Blackrock for the hexo when returning from Ash Canyon, and then backtrack from Blackrock to the summit. The easiest way to tell if you're on loot table 3 early is to check the container in Timberwolf Mountain's birch forest. If there's a lantern by the container, that means you're on loot table 3, and you'll have to take this longer route. Summiting early on Misery is extremely useful, not just for the loot itself or the guaranteed flask, but the summit always has a flock of ptarmigans, or even multiple, which you want to hunt for the insulation ASAP. There's also a 50% chance of finding a flare gun with 3 shells on the summit, and this is a huge help early on, as those 3 shells mean 3 dead bears without having to craft the bow first, which will let you craft your bear coats a couple days earlier. Regardless, you will want to forge sooner or later anyway. Once you've summited, you can head back to Pleasant Valley to find a hammer. After you're past this setup phase, your clothing will probably look like this, and you'll likely progressed enough for the next affliction to kick in. After forging, you're a lot more free to go wherever you want as you slowly transition into mid-game, and your main priorities is crafting all the warm clothing and finding the tools you haven't found yet. Of course, this all sounds simple in theory, but all the misery afflictions will slowly trigger and make your life a lot harder. And they will all require some playstyle adjustment. With Frigid Bones, warming up will take too long. Early on, before you get warm clothing, this doesn't change that much, as you can just choose to tank cold damage. Trying to stay warm will be pretty much impossible, as you get cold very fast with low feels-like temperatures, but the damage you take from the cold remains constant, no matter if it's -1 or -100. But you cannot rely on this forever. Once broken body hits, you will no longer be able to heal, and that's why it's so important to get the warmest clothing possible. With Frigid Bones and Broken Body, preventing heat loss is much more important than warming up, and every degree matters. At -1 feels like, you can travel 3 times as long as at -3 feels like. Once you kill your first moose, it might be tempting to get a satchel for another 5 kilos of carry weight, but it's a good idea to keep the second insulation on you and switch between the two based on what do you need more. With Frigid Bones and Broken Body, you'll often be in a situation where the second insulation will allow you to travel much farther than the satchel, even if it means you're a bit encumbered and move slower. They're both very light items and don't require mending too often, so carrying both of them is not a big deal. There are a few more ways to get some extra warmth. Remember that carrying a lit torch increases air temperature by 3 degrees. That's basically cold fusion and a half. A trick most people don't know is carrying a second torch in placement mode and placing it under you as you walk will give you another 3 degrees of warmth for a total of 6 degrees. Carrying 2 torches like that essentially gives you extra warmth roughly equivalent to a bearskin coat. This trick usually enables you to travel in the afternoon without having to stop for warm-ups, even with Frigid Bones. Lit lanterns also increase the temp by 3 degrees, just like torches. This might be handy to remember when you don't have a lit torch and want to save matches. Imagine a scenario where it's like -4 and you're near freezing, without a torch, still some distance away from shelter. You could either spend a match, a bunch of coal, and sit there for an hour, and then walk back to safety, or you could just light the lantern, which brings the temperature to -1, and walk to safety right away, saving you time, coal, and matches for the low price of some lantern fuel. Lastly, don't forget that warming up bonus from teas halves your freezing rate, in addition to giving you an instant warmth boost when drunk. Medicinal teas apply double warmth boost when drunk, one part for the tea, just like any other, and the other when it's fully consumed and the medicinal effect of the tea is not used. Keep in mind that you won't get the second half of the boost if you have any affliction that you can use the tea on, even if that affliction is not cured by the tea. With Rheumatic Joints removing our ability to properly sprint, dancing animals is no longer viable, and a safer approach to kill bears and moose is needed. There is a very safe method involving campfires that lets you kill pretty much any animal in the game. And because of Frigid Bones, you should have a lit torch on you most of the time anyway. Since the Buried Echoes update, something changed with wildlife behavior. All animals will now ignore you when you're near a lit campfire, so in order to hunt safely on Misery, you can step away from the campfire to shoot your shot, go back to the campfire to break aggro, and repeat as many times as needed. Make sure you don't stand too close to the campfire while shooting the shot, as the animal will just do what it normally does when it's not aware of your presence, it flees. Damage taken on sprains seems like it would significantly limit your ability to travel, especially once broken body hits. But when you understand how sprain risk works, you can still take most shortcuts in the game. When you walk on a steep slope, you get a sprain risk indicator on your screen. A sprain has some base chance to be rolled and depends on how steep the slope is, and then further increased by rheumatic joints, but also by encumbrance, exhaustion, and sprinting. Conversely, crouching and crampons lower the chance of sprain. However, once you get broken body, none of this really matters, as you simply can't afford to get sprains and take further damage, no matter how unlikely. Luckily, there is a reliable way to avoid sprains. Whether you get a sprain or not is always rolled after 10 seconds of having sprain risk. Clearing the sprain risk before the 10 seconds are up always resets the timer, and not moving pauses it. This means if you can get somewhere, anywhere, flat enough within 10 seconds of goading, you will never ever get a sprain, and sprinting can help you do that for longer slopes. It doesn't matter if sprinting increases the sprain chance if the chance is never rolled in the first place. As long as you never go over 10 seconds, you can goad all you want, even late game misery. When it comes to sour stomach and the ever-present food poisoning risk, you mostly need to remember two thresholds, 20% and 75%. Most food is safe to eat as long as it is above 20%, even with sour stomach. There are a few food types that can still give you food poisoning even above 20% condition, and that's chocolate bars, granola bars, tin of sardines, peanut butter, and all meat. These are only safe above the second threshold, 75%. All food above 75% condition is safe to eat, with raw meat being the one obvious exception, which is never ever safe. Everything else is safe to eat above 20%, including recipes that contain meat, but also foods like beef jerky, crackers, and even cattails. It's a common misconception that these three never cause food poisoning, but that's not quite true. These foods are great because they never decay. The condition you find them in will be the condition they stay on forever, no matter how long you keep them. But with both beef jerky and crackers, there's a small chance you'll simply find them at low condition. They still won't decay, but if they are below 20% condition, they are not safe to eat. Cattails should always remain at 100% though, and that makes them immensely valuable on misery, as it's food you can actually store all around the map, and it will stay there waiting for you, food poisoning free forever. Finally, all drinks are safe to consume regardless of their condition, so it might be a good idea to save all the sodas as emergency calories for when you really need them. Sour stomach doubles the food poisoning chance from food, but if the chance is 0%, 2 times 0 is still 0, so as long as the food is above these thresholds, you never have to worry about food poisoning. Still, it's recommended to not eat food exactly at 20% due to rounding. Haunted Mind mostly means less condition recovered every day and doesn't significantly impact your playstyle, especially since the affliction eventually gets replaced by Broken Body, and from day 46 it won't really affect you at all. You should already be drinking birch teas for warmth to supplement the healing anyway, but it's also good to keep in mind that green teas and stems will not heal you after day 46, so use them whenever you can. Stim spawns on Misery are the same as on Interloper, and can help you explore and loot in early and mid game a little bit faster. It's also a good idea to sleep in beds instead of your bedroll whenever possible, as you recover more condition when resting in beds. That should be just about everything you need to counter the Misery afflictions. Once day 46 hits, You will not be able to recover your mistakes as condition recovery is removed. But since all these afflictions can be countered in some way, it's still possible to survive forever, as miserable as that would be. But that's a topic for another video. Thank you for watching.